Well, howdy friends. Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters and the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and welcome back to another episode in our series on fly casting. Today we're going to take a look at the basic roll cast, a really great cast to have in your arsenal when your back's against the wall. All right, friends, the roll cast, super easy. In fact, the cool part about this, it's going to be a super short episode because you already know how to do this, okay? A basic roll cast, you're simply going to bring the line back, drag it back, leaving the line and the leader and the fly on the water. You're going to bring that line back until it stops at about that 1 o'clock position. And this is going to form a little bit of a D loop behind you. And then you're going to roll it right out. Okay, you're going to bring it back and stop. Very important that you leave the line on the surface of the water. And from there, it's just a down cast or a forward cast. Okay, from approximately that 1 o'clock position, you're going to drive it through in a straight line to approximately that 10 o'clock position and stop the rod, just as if you were making a forward cast. Okay, bring it back. Stop, roll. If you do it right, it's just going to roll right out there. The surface tension of the water loads the rod. Again, this is very helpful if you can't make an upcast. If you've got a row of trees behind you, if your back's against a brick wall, what have you, it's a very effective cast, and it's a good one to know. But it's very important that you leave the line on the surface of the water. I see a lot of people that try this and they're so used to lifting the line off and catapulting it behind them that they have trouble actually leaving it on the surface. So leave the line on the surface, come to a stop, you form your D loop behind you, that's what helps to load the rod, and then you simply make a forward cast, again stopping at the rod tip at about eye level. Now you're gonna come across some videos and some folks out there that tell you to bring it back to this 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock position, and they tell you to slam the rod down to the 9 o'clock position. And that couldn't be more wrong. Okay, that's taking, as you can understand, that's taking the rod tip in a big arc motion, and of course what's going to happen is the line is going to pile up on you and it's not going to straighten out in front of you. So do not listen to the folks that tell you to slam it down to 9 o'clock. You stop about eye level. So bring it here to the 1 o'clock, drive it to 10 o'clock as you normally would, and it's going to roll right out. Now another thing that you can do, if you're trying to make a long cast or you're casting with a fairly heavy fly, you can do the same thing with breaking your wrist that we've taught you in a standard cast. Bring it to that 1 o'clock position, and then just like a baseball pitcher, wind up by breaking your wrist, and it's going to allow the rod to bend more, and it's going to make that roll cast even better and more effective. Just make sure again that you're stopping at approximately that 10 o'clock position. Okay, so don't be afraid, as always, to break your wrist. Bring it back and stop, break your wrist, you wind up a little bit, drive it in a straight line path through to 10 o'clock, and it's going to roll right off the water just like butter. You know, another variation of this, I've always called it a bastardized roll cast. I suppose you could also call it a water haul because you're using the surface tension of the water to load the rod down below you. But this is highly effective when you're fishing a high stick nymph rig, whether that be with an indicator split shot and 1 or 2 flies, or you're fishing tight line or Euro nymphing with a heavy tungsten jig fly and another fly behind it. But you're basically going to make a roll cast using, again, the surface tension of the water to load the rod below you, and then you just punch it in at the target. Basically, you just stop your thumb, which stops the rod tip, and where your thumb points is where the fly and the split shot are going to go. Okay, the current, which is flowing from my right to left, has brought my drift directly below me. Very important that you start with your rod tip right at the water, as we've always told you, so that you get it moving and you bring the split shot and the flies right to the surface. And then call it this 1 o'clock position. You're going to drive it through to about 10. And really, it's really gentle. You just kind of bring your thumb to a stop, and where your thumb points is basically exactly where the fly is going to go, as we already know. But remember, when you're casting with an indicator, split shot, heavy flies, or the heavy tungsten jig flies, you really don't want a tight loop. So we're really not trying to get a laser sharp loop. We want to open that loop quite a bit, or you're going to wind up getting tangled. And not to mention the presentation, the delivery of the nymphs is much better. Especially with today's modern 10-foot and 11-foot high stick nymphing or Euro nymphing rods, these soft tips, they're really, really amazing. Not only are they great at detecting strikes, but they're fantastic at casting. Now you want to make sure, again, we get it moving, we bring it up to about this 1 o'clock position, and then drive it through roughly to 10. But remember that when you have an indicator and split shot and a couple of heavy nymphs on there, you don't want a tight loop. You don't want a razor sharp loop in this situation, or else it's going to close on you and collapse and become a big mess. We want to open that loop up a little bit, and we can do that simply by going a little further than 90 degrees. A little further than 90 degrees, we get a nice open loop, a nice gentle presentation. I almost never, when I'm fishing an indicator and split shot, or I'm fishing a Euro style nymph rig with a heavy tungsten jig fly, I almost never come behind me and make an overhead cast. There's just usually no reason to. Now the same technique can be used when you're fishing streamers, whether you're fishing with a floating line and a weighted fly, or you're fishing a sink tip line. Again, let it swing right below you in the current, get it moving, turn your hand at the target and point your thumb right at that target, and you're just going to stop the rod tip and it's just going to go. It's a very, very effective, very, very efficient and very easy technique, again, of applying to the roll cast to everyday fishing situations. You've heard me talk about breaking your wrist. On a standard fly cast, after you've stopped on your upcast and you form the loop, you can drop your wrist back a little bit, and that's just like a baseball pitcher winding up to throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, or if you're using the airplane taking off the runway analogy, it makes your runway longer. You're basically starting the load in the rod from back here instead of up here. You might remember me telling you that if you don't creep backwards a little bit, it's like making a half a fly cast, as my good friend Flip Pallet used to say to me all the time. Well, you can do the same exact thing with a roll cast, okay? When you start with the rod tip low, you can simply bring the rod back behind you just by breaking your wrist, again, right here. Then you're going to bring it up to that 1 o'clock position, drive it through to a little past 10, and you just absolutely maximize the load in that fly rod, and it becomes super, super easy. You're going to be blown away at how easy it is if you just bring that rod back behind you and then drive it through to that stopping position, which again might be a little more than 90 degrees because you're trying to open that loop up a little bit. But again, we're going to start low, and in this case we'll bring the rod tip behind us as we're bringing the fly and the split shot to the surface, then drive it through, and man, it's just like slicing hot butter. All right, friends, so we thought we'd change the venue a little bit. We drove about 10 miles north and look what happens. Typical Ohio fall. Anyways, I wanted to take a second and talk about a variation, but very, very practical and useful application of the roll cast. And it's called the roll cast pickup. And the roll cast pickup, again, very useful. And let's say that your line is piled up in front of you. I see this a lot. Okay, people have their line piled up in front of them for whatever reason. Maybe the current has blown it back at you, or just because of your drift, it's all kind of piled up. Okay, you really can't just pick that up, because remember, one of the first steps is you must get the end of the fly line moving, as well as the leader and the fly. And if the line's all piled up right there, you're gonna see that my fly may even be sitting on the bottom. No way can you just lift that up and make a cast. So what you can do is tighten up a little bit, strip in, bring it back, and just by making that first step of the roll cast, by bringing the rod back to that 1 o'clock position, forming your D loop, you just got the tip of the fly line moving, or excuse me, you've gotten all that slack taken out of it, you got the end of the fly line moving and the leader, and then you can make a roll cast, pick it up and make a full-blown cast and shoot all that line very easily. Okay, this is a big mistake that I see a lot of people make, not only beginners, but again, that line is piled up in front of you and you just can't rip it out of the water and make an upcast, because by the time you pull the slack out, realize you're already back here anyways, and where are you gonna go? Okay, so you got that line piled up, you bring it back and stop, and now the end of the line's moving, pick it up and go, and you'll be able to shoot all that line with one false cast, no problem. Okay, this is also very useful. We have a lot of people say, well, how do I start my cast? Well, pull off a bunch of line, just drop it in the water in front of you. Again, it's going to be piled up. Bring it back, make a roll cast, pick up, and shoot. Off you go, just as easy as slicing hot butter. So now imagine for a moment that we're in the Bahamas, bone fishing. We're on the nose of a bonefish skiff, and we're at the ready position, which is usually where you're going to be. You're going to have the line at your feet, you're going to have the leader and the fly basically in your hand, okay? You're going to use basically this same technique, the roll cast pickup, where you're going to simply throw the line and the leader and the fly into the water. You're going to sweep it back over the nose of the boat. You're going to make a roll cast pickup, and then you're going to shoot that fly line, of course, using a double haul to help you, which is coming in a future episode. Okay, so the same basic technique, the roll cast pickup, where you've got the line in your hand, you've got a bunch of slack at your feet in this case. You're going to throw the fly into the water, sweep it back over the nose of the boat. The resistance of the water will help keep tight on the tip of your fly line. You're going to roll cast pickup, go right on the fish, one basically false cast, utilizing that roll cast pickup to get things started. So a simple variation called the roll cast pickup that you're going to find highly useful, and you're going to use it a lot. If you get ice in your guides and you don't have with you your Loon Stanley's Ice Off Paste, you can simply dip your rod in the water for a second or so. It'll usually clear that ice and you'll be able to cast just like butter. Oh, and also, if it's 22 degrees out, don't use your flip pallet tropical saltwater fly line. Well, there you go, friends, the basic roll cast. As I stated before, you already know how to do it. All of the principles of a basic forward cast apply. 1 o'clock to 10 o'clock, rod tip in a straight line path, stop the rod tip above eye level, and it's gonna roll right out. It's a highly useful cast though. You're gonna find a lot of use for it. So get out there and practice it. But make sure that you practice on water. You really need the surface tension of the water to drag on the line and to help load the rod. But again, get out and practice it. Don't slam it down to 9 o'clock, just make a forward cast. So I want you all to stay tuned, because in our next episode of Fly Casting, we're gonna cover the double haul. And I know that a lot of you have been waiting patiently for that. So be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and stay tuned, because we've got a lot coming at you.
Whoa, what are you wearing, Brian? Looking good.
Oh man, thanks for noticing. If you ever see me wearing a t-shirt, it's gonna say Mad River Outfitters. And for sure, it'll be over top of a plaid. Get yourself a Mad River Outfitters t-shirt. There's a link in the description.